Things feel weird, don't they? It's been a long time since the shutdown happened and knocked all of our lives into disarray and chaos. Sometimes it feels like things have always been this way, doesn't it? Just me? Probably. Either way, it's undeniable that with this set of circumstances thrown at us, many people, myself included, have probably started to feel more hopeless, lost, almost like there isn't any real path forward. Challenges thrown at us can feel like obstacles that just keep getting more and more difficult to get around. In a more metaphorical sense, it can feel like a mountain. Celeste is a mountain climbing game. It's the speedrunning game. It's, well, it's a game where you play as a young woman who escapes to Canada for a while just to try and get herself together. This game means a lot to me and many others. For some, this game helped them learn to deal with really tough things in life. For others, it was a challenging game with a really cute story about learning to overcome yourself. For me, it's got some seriously good music. I'd like to take some time to talk about this game's music, and just how it uses instrumentation to make you, the player, feel what the protagonist feels as you progress through each section and obstacle in the game. Now, I'm currently a college student with very, very limited knowledge of music theory. Hell, I can barely remember the treble clef with the whole "every good boy does fine" little trick. Haven't heard that one in a while, have you? What I do know, however, is how instruments can convey an emotion based on what kind of melodies are played and what tone the instrument has, as well as what the writer's intent was when composing each of these pieces. The writer, Lena Raine, is an extremely talented and very known name in the video game soundtrack industry, lending her works to games like Deltarune, Spin Rhythm, and believe it or not, even Minecraft. She's an extremely experienced composer and personally one of my favorites. Along with giving my own thoughts and outlining some of her strategies for getting emotion out of the player, I'll also be referring to many of her interviews for how she came up with her ideas and concepts for her music in this game. I'll be using the word feeling quite an amount, so bear with me as we go up the mountain together. Unlike most games, Celeste chooses to not just throw you in. Gives you a small scene with the protagonist, who I'll now be calling Madeline, getting out of her car and looking for the mountain trail. As you begin moving, and get taught the first two major mechanics, that being jumping and climbing, difficult I'm sure, you come across an old lady that lives on the base of a mountain, warning you about just how dangerous the mountain can be, as well as making fun of you for not being ready to climb this whole thing. Madeline, after getting laughed at, bids her farewell and begins to walk on the bridge, leading to the mountain trail, where she quickly realizes two things. One, she isn't safe. And two, this mountain isn't normal. Now, the music here is meant to really drive home how Madeline is feeling at the moment. She's feeling calm, she's pensive, she's hesitant. The piano drives home this sense of take a small moment before you keep going, illustrated greatly not only by the slow piano, but even the sound of the piano pedal being pressed if you listen closely. Although it's not fully apparent why yet, The music itself acts as a great foreshadow into the game's future, not only by playing the melody with the piano, which represents Madeline, but also playing and supporting the piano melody with this chiptune-like instrument, representing something we'll get to in a while. Regardless, the sense of taking a moment almost instantly leaves once the bridge starts crumbling. The melody speeds up, while synth is added to show danger and raise tension more and more as the falling bricks start to catch up to you. And as you jump for it, everything stops. You're not only taught your final major mechanic, the dash, but also hear the music stop, and then return to its calm for a single piano note to end the song. Almost like a single breath of air. Personally, I think it's an extremely well done tutorial, not only showing the player what they'll be doing for the whole game, but also putting them in a similar headspace to Madeline by shifting the music to make them feel it. All this culminates into a really well done transition into the first real chapter of the game, the Forgotten City. This game's journey begins by truly letting you explore the depths of how your movement's gonna work. The game gives you a jump, a dash, and some limited climbing ability. As you progress through this now empty city, you get to explore momentum with blocks that zip to another place on a track when you stand on them. You get to bounce around place to place with springs scattered around the entire stage. They show you falling blocks, secret rooms, collectibles like the strawberry and cassette tapes, and the main chapter collectible with the crystal heart and its weird bird puzzle. Now, like every platformer, or game in general, level 1 isn't too difficult. A few minor obstacles and you're through. And the music knows this. It gives the player a sense of confidence and excitement for the journey they're about to take with Madeline. The music starts off with a piano playing a repeating melody that not only captures the essence of starting, but acts as a segue from the music in the prologue. The prologue's piano quickly being joined by some snares and another synth melody, overall filling the extremely depressing cityscape with a sense of optimism that makes you want to get to the end. Chapter 1's setting of this barren city drives home your isolation. Nothing but machines and evidence of a past civilization here. Now it's all cold and lost. Exploration leads to nothing but new challenges and small collectibles. And that is, until you meet Theo. Up until this point, you've been completely alone. The second you meet another face, however, you're bombarded with information in the form of music and visuals. Theo, you soon learn, is another mountain climber. Not here to climb to the summit like you, but here to take some good pictures and hopefully find out where he's supposed to go in life. Taking a bit of a step back though, the second you step into this room, the music fades and transitions to this soft and welcoming guitar, and a small bonfire lighting up the middle of the room, almost telling the player, it's alright, you can rest here for a sec. This guitar, along with being a welcoming sound, is also going to be the representing sound for Theo, giving the player a sense that at any time, you can hear a bit of comfort with Theo's guitar. Moving along to the end of the stage, Madeline makes it to the edge of the city and lights her own bonfire. And having reached her first major checkpoint, she begins to reflect on her trek so far. And how does she think it's going? Well, once again, the piano overtakes the song to represent Madeline's pensive nature in the moment. This ending perfectly moves us into the beginning act of our second chapter, where things pick up pretty quickly. Following Madeline falling asleep at the edge of the city, Chapter 2 opens with Madeline waking up later that night. A beautiful array of stars light the sky behind you. as this faint synth plays a soothing yet dreamy melody, closely followed by a piano that grounds us back to Madeline herself as she begins to explore these old ruins. You encounter these weird glass-like blocks that just go tink and tink with each step, and progressing through the level, you get through spike-filled room after spike-filled room. And now, up until this point, you've really seen a small portion of this level. The rest seems blocked off and closed by these blob-like things that still make no sense to you. The music still sounds dreamlike and calm, and that is until you reach this mirror. Once you get past each of these rooms, you come into this small chamber, holding a large mirror in the middle, and as you approach it, the music quickly fades. The piano plays a few notes, signaling confusion and curiosity as you see this reflection of yourself. And then suddenly, this right here is what made me go from liking this game to falling in love with it. As your reflection gets away, the old blocks you saw before have a sort of awakening as this level throws a new mechanic at you. But more importantly, the music now becomes more active by adding a collection of snares to represent the newfound conflict that's just shown itself to you. What makes this particular transition so ear-catching to me is how the emotion is conveyed through the drum without taking away from the original tune. You still hear the synth and piano, but rather than being overtaken by the drums, it's almost like the tune is amplified to have a greater effect on you. Along with making the song more catchy, it also perfectly mirrors the fact that the level also has more to explore, new collectibles and pathways being opened up by those same blobs as before. After exploring for another while, you solve some puzzles, which in turn also help you learn how these blobs work. And before you get into this room, the music fades. Sort of. Get ready. And the silence can hit you pretty hard. See? Silence works wonders to make you anticipate the next sound or action that happens. Now in this section, this reflection of you, that I'll be calling Battlein, mostly because the community loves that name, tries to talk you out of climbing this mountain, introducing itself as part of you. And now, the music really shows off its use of motif, as it plays not only synth from before to signal this paranormal and dangerous feeling, but it's also a reprise of Madeline's own piano theme to tell us, the player, that this really is a fragment of ourselves. The way that the notes sort of trail off rather than lead into each other gives this more of a ghostly feel. But even with this almost intruding melody, you can still hear Madeline's instrument, the piano, slowly supporting the synth, almost to tell you that Madeline is taking a back seat to whatever Battlein wants to say. And as this melody starts to slow down and build up towards the end, it tells us, the player, oh god, things are about to happen, aren't they? And, of course they do, as slowly but surely she begins to become more threatening, until of course... Here is where all the sounds we've heard so far culminate to give us a real experience of dread and panic. The tune now has a mix of three sounds we should recognize greatly. Madeleine's theme, the stage's dreamy synth mixed with Battlein's own synth playing with a slight delay, not only to support the song, but also serving as another reminder that she's right behind you, or in other words, delayed. The chase goes on for a bit, as more copies of Battlein start to appear and spikes become greater in number. The only thing that's helping you escape are those blobs from before, but even then, it's only temporary because Battlein mimics your exact movements. It takes a pretty good amount of skill and quick thinking to get past all these falling blocks and tiny gaps. The music almost starts to feel suffocating towards the end. Switches that float in the air are forcing you to find the fastest and safest path to them, sometimes even forcing you to backtrack and dodge all the copies of Battlein. Although fast, the song stays steady. Yeah, it's making you panic, but it's also acting like a kind of metronome, telling you it's scary, but take a breath, you'll figure it out. The passages are getting smaller and more narrow, until all that's left is a leap of faith. Finally, Madeline disappears, and you get away. After walking around for a little bit, you reach this telephone booth where you seem both glad and annoyed at this person talking to you. As you talk about the danger and give them information on what's just happened, the person just brushes it aside, doesn't even take you even remotely serious, and tells you you don't need to make up a story as a low synth drones on in the background. As you explain what's going on, the person tells you that they haven't talked to you in months and that you only call them when you're having a panic attack. The more you explain about what's going on, the more you realize you're just dreaming. You begin to doubt yourself, screaming into the air, "Why am I even doing this?" And Madeline appears, echoing your sentiments and telling you it's time to give up, before the phone becomes this creature that eats you whole. All the while, a theremin plays a stinger to signal the conclusion of this section, and it snaps you out of your nightmare. When you wake up from a nightmare, it can take a second for you to process and understand what just happened. You might feel groggy or tired, lost, or sometimes even overwhelmed, and the music takes on nothing but a soft piano. Once again, the pedals of each press can be heard as you explore the actual ruins. You'll notice that each location you pass here is exactly the same as the one in the dream world. And once again, you hear that guitar as you run into Theo. His guitar, for a second, snaps you out of your funk, although not entirely, as the photo you take with him highlights just how frazzled you really are from the event. In the end, you talking to Theo was just a bit of a distraction. Walking along, you come across the same phone booth as the one in your dream. This time, however, you take initiative and call your mom, just to talk about what's going on. This chapter highlights one of my favorite things in Celeste. The start of the chapter sets you up with this catchy melody that almost drowns you in this dreamy feeling before immediately turning it against you with the battle line chase. However, because of the use and reuse of motif and musical ideas they present, once we hit this waking part of the stage, the music has been so embedded in our heads that it forces the player to think back on every part of the level we just got through. It not only drives home how Madeline is reflecting, but makes you, the player, think back on the other parts of the level with the same music. It's such a clever move. And even though I love this chapter, it's time to move on. Escaping the old ruins, you march on towards the summit, and very quickly start coming across these weird fuzzy things. As this chapter's main instrument appears, the theremin. If you've ever heard of it, you'll know that this instrument is used in all sorts of horror media, to build tension or as a sort of instrument to show that things are paranormal. Which is fitting as we walk into this now empty hotel and ring this bell for service, prompting, well... This is Mr. Oshiro, the lost spirit that takes care of this establishment, and the person who I guarantee you will try his very hardest to get you a comfortable room. Throughout the chapter, he leads us from room to room, wanting to convince us to stay in his hotel. He isn't very confident though. Each time he talks to us, and each time he feels nervous, he'll turn to the side and talk to himself, essentially either trying to calm himself down or beating himself up, which is really weird. These fuzzy blobs seem to be everywhere, and really do cause a hassle. Many deaths later, we make it to the central room, where this insane mess of books and towels and boxes act like some kind of labyrinth. After waiting around it for a bit, talking to Oshiro, he tells us that he's so sorry and that he's gonna get to work cleaning for us. But since we don't want to stay and want to get out of here as quickly as possible, Madeline offers her hand in help, and Oshiro panics, seeing this as some sort of dishonor, because he should be the one keeping this place clean. Now, there are videos that talk about this specific area a lot better than I do, and I'll probably link that video down below. But here, the song that plays, oddly enough, even though it's tense, isn't making us feel tense. More rather, it's trying to convey how Mr. Oshiro feels. See, regardless, we slowly get through the corridors and clean mess after mess, slowly seeing Oshiro get more and more panicked. Here, the music does something clever. After each mess is cleaned, the music adds a single instrument, not only giving you a sense of progress as the area starts to clean up, but subtly nodding to the effect that this is having on Oshiro. Things get more intense and the tempo starts feeling slightly faster, but it never makes you feel worried. We see Oshiro get angry, but us, the player, never feels stressed out. So, once you're done, he acts as if it was no big deal. Obviously, it is. But what's interesting is that because of how intense the music is, we the player know he's lying to us, even though Madeline still believes Oshiro and continues following him. After climbing an elevator shaft and talking to Theo, who is really urging us to just leave Oshiro alone and leave, we keep crossing more of these blob-infested areas and keep pushing ahead until we get our big reveal. Specifically, that Oshiro, whenever he feels anxious, is spawning these little fuzzies. Now, the music starts making more sense. Only now does this tense feeling start to get to you as the rooms get longer and more narrow. Everything is moving and it seems like there's no safe way to get to each room. And after intense and precise platforming, you make it to this beautiful looking room that Oshiro has been peddling to you ever since you got here. Madeline tries to be kind and tries to find anything nice to say about this, and fails. She once again says that she's just trying to leave, and Oshiro panics. And then we see a familiar face. Ouch. As you leave through the hole that Madeline made, we're reminded of the previous chapter with a song that played once we woke up. Again, reflection takes over, but for a brief second, as we think about how we really treated Oshiro. We lied to him. We promised him we'd stay, only to find an easier exit. And just like in real life, actions have consequences. Oshiro returns and asks a single question. Once again, ouch. Oshiro's in a rage, and the music holds no more punches. Now the drums speed up. Just a slight amount, forcing this tension onto you instead of Oshiro, since now you're the one in danger here. A chase starts up with you running through the remains of the hotel. As you dodge and dash through these scattered fuzzies, you're left to wonder what went wrong. Not for too long, of course, otherwise. You keep moving ahead, and once you finally make it to the end, you're trapped. Oshiro lashes out in rage as you just plead to leave. Once you fall, Oshiro leaves by telling you he's going to clean up the hotel. And as the chapter ends, we leave off with the same calm sounds of piano and theremin. This chapter, although not one of my favorites, still manages to blow me away with how its song manages to convey information to the player. Whether it's telling the player they're making progress, like with the cleaning switches, or telling us that we need to run away by using that same song in the chase. I love the ideas presented. In the end, what this chapter does is give us questions. Why is Madeline doing this? Is she doing okay? Does she feel guilt for what she did? All of these questions that we'll have plenty of time to think about in Chapter 4. Usually, mountains are seen as cold, quiet, and lonely places, and although this game makes it look beautiful with its pastel yellows, pinks, and blues, it's still desolate. But sometimes that's not a bad thing. Walking past these rocks and puddles, you run into the old lady again and have a brief conversation about how Shiro is, in the end, just a spirit. She tells him about how stubborn he is and to just not worry about him, and then wishes her luck, warning her to be mindful of the wind. And of course, the second you leave the area, we come to the stage's first gimmick, the changing wind. And before moving any further, this chapter quickly identifies itself as different from the rest with its instrumentation. Unlike chapter 2 or 3, there's only a slight, low droning synth in the background. There's no paranormal threat here, only the natural dangers of the mountain and you, piano, and low synth. Each of these rooms holds either a strawberry or just is the path forward. The wind sways back and forth. It's a neat little detail too. The wind, although acting as a challenge, also helps you at times, either speeding you up to get to the next room or slowing you down to keep you from falling. It's a good way to drive home that there's no real enemy at this level, it's just a natural force. The level is meant to reflect on the journey so far, a way to progress while also taking a pause to fully chew through the information you've gotten so far. Although calm, it picks up quite a bit towards the end as the wind gets stronger. It's getting drastic. Snowballs are now blowing into you and the platforms are getting smaller and smaller, falling faster than you can react. Until this leap of faith that you're forced to make, with the only ally you have being the wind that was forcing you back for the entire level. Upon landing, you come across this small gondola, where, after finally having a break to think and process, the game rewards you by hearing relief. Hearing that oh so familiar guitar. And although I could talk about this next scene, I think it works best being played on its own. Lena Rain says, "I know what this feels like. I know how it can feel like control is taken away from you in a lot of ways. The thing that stuck out to me the most was trying to display with the music the feeling of trying to be in control, to focus on something, and then something being completely out of your control, and the way that those two things interact. The way I ended up doing it was by having two pieces of the music, and they were sort of dynamically tied together. You had the core instrument of the piano playing this repetitive phrase and just having it go over and over and over, and it being sort of this almost mantra for the character to try and focus on, to breathe and calm down. But then, as the panic attack sets in, As the control is taken away from her, the large, overbearing synth just kind of rise and swell up and completely engulf that line. It's still playing the entire time, but eventually you can't hear it anymore. That feeling that I really wanted to get across was to tie it into personal experience. One of those feelings that I kind of really center on when I'm trying to calm myself down is realizing, like, oh, my heart is beating way faster than I feel like it absolutely should. And there's no way that I can actually calm it down, so I have to do something else rather than focusing on that specifically. So that continual heartbeat and pace of the music, it's this sort of thing that overwhelms what you're trying to focus on. And then, as you're actually able to calm down, it emerges again, and you can breathe again, and refocus on what it is you're trying to do. This is what Lena Raine said about what can be considered the first real turning point for Madeline, the panic attack, and more importantly, the way she deals with said panic attack with Theo's help. This friend you've made along the way, he shows you this exercise that helps you come back into your senses. The score respectfully and thoughtfully portrays an anxiety attack. And the chapter ends with you and Theo getting off, passing this challenge, and ending at a small cavern ahead of these two adventurers. Like I said before, Chapter 4 is a lot more different than 2 or 3. There's no enemy, there's no physical thing trying to stop you from moving forward. But I like it as a way for the player to just explore the mountain itself for a bit. Up until this point, we've only seen the ruins, the city, and the hotel. We haven't actually seen the natural mountain in its own state. Hearing the music swell up and change as you keep getting further and further, it's this nice feeling. One, because you're getting ahead, but two, because it also gets your blood pumping. The more intense it feels, the more you want to make it to the end. Not only just so you can see what comes next, but because you want to avoid danger. It's also a very nice scene with Theo. The way they build this relationship with just their music and their tiny conversations is really impressive. My personal favorite thing is that photo they take on the gondola. Picking up exactly where you left off with Theo, he tells you about these ruins and hurriedly rushes in to see if he can get a really good picture to get himself popular in social media. Although worried, you soon follow, and, well, things are going wrong. After picking up Theo's lost phone, you carry on and are left to explore. The music here is somber, it's echoey, and piano plays while, for the first time, string instruments play. A sound that, although beautiful, makes the player almost uneasy because up until now, we've never heard a violin or anything of that type of sound. And that's a common theme here, unease. Although there's almost no hazards along the main path of the temple, you don't feel safe. You don't feel like taking it slow. You want to find Theo and get out of here. Is that? Theo's in a mirror. Now, having a mission, the string becomes slightly more digital, not only amplifying the unease, but making this place seem even more unsafe, with synth just about creeping in. Exploring the temple really only leads to more twisted corridors, empty caverns, and the rare moving spike. The music continues to essentially torture you. It's almost playing with your mind because up until this point, piano has always been Madeline's theme. It's always been calm. It's always been what brings you back to the game. It's what keeps you feeling safe. But here, because it's the only instrument, well, the only main instrument, it feels almost wrong, like everything is backwards. You keep moving through these halls and seeing all these dangerous rooms, these yellow lights making you feel uneasy in their own right, as yellow really represents sickness or danger. You eventually find your way to this one room with a giant mirror. And, well, if you've been paying any attention, mirrors haven't exactly been so friendly. You activate these two switches, and yeah, this mirror isn't exactly friendly either. Nothing but synth, low synth, faded colors, and for the first time, you don't even play as yourself. You play as this weird eyeball monster. Another clever trick that this game is using to teach you how these enemies work. But Music 2 also forces you to understand that this thing is dangerous, and as we see it kill Madeline, it wakes her up. And after she does wake up, the gloves are off. We're in the mirror world now. Madeline floats at the bottom of this corridor in anticipation for you, talking to you, and blaming you for creating this world. These monsters, these hazards, all forced into existence by you, your twisted mind. You tell her to leave you alone, and as you start exploring, all those monsters that you saw in that nightmare start chasing you. All these spikes and twisted shards are everywhere, and you almost never get a single second to breathe. Every room has some kind of danger. You keep forcing yourself to move until you eventually just break down and scream at yourself. You want to give in. You feel like an intruder in your own head. But you remember the feather, the trick that you used earlier to keep yourself calm and in check. Now, in this next section, you have to go around the area and look for keys. These keys unlock these blocks that are just keeping you from moving ahead. But what's interesting here is the music. Now, at first glance, it might seem like it's calm, but it doesn't take very long to hear these human-like whispers in the sound. Once again, these things make you feel uneasy. It doesn't feel natural. And if you listen closely, it's actually in reverse. Here's what this portion of the song sounds like when you play it backwards.
Sometimes I don't really know what's going on anymore. I don't know who I am. I just look in the mirror and don't know who I'm looking at or who's looking at me.
Anxiety. It's a hard topic, but it becomes even harder to imagine when you realize that these are all just thoughts that Lena Raine had about herself. She put her own experience into this song, not just because she wanted to make it sound good, but because she wanted to make it personal to the player. This addition could have easily been skipped. It could have easily been replaced by, I don't know, like a drum or any other instrument you could think of. Hell, a flute probably would have been some addition to the song, but no. Lena decided to make this personal because she knows that the music is super important to this game. Finally, after escaping that section, we run into Theo, who's now trapped in a crystal. After talking to him about it, you realize that the only way you're both getting out of this place is if Madeline carries Theo. So, you do. And you get through a single room where you get to practice the throwing and carrying mechanics before the monsters start to attack. And the second one does, the drums start up as things feel tense. The puzzles are getting harder and more precise. And once again, this is shown with a synth that's slowly rising in intensity. The piano gets more involved, however, This is subtly telling the player that Madeline is under control. She has this under wraps. The clever thing here is that in rooms with no monsters in it, the drums stop, and once again continue once you enter a room that has them in it. As you near the end of the level, the screen distorts, synth pulses, and so does this force that tries heavily to keep you in. At the end of this corridor is a huge eye that you and Theo together destroy. After finally escaping, the chapter ends on you carrying a now unconscious Theo on your shoulder as you walk out of the temple. The Mirror Temple holds some of the most tense scenes in the game. We learned how bad Madeline's anxiety really is, as well as Theo's own issues of attention. As the action unfolds, there's no time for them to stop. They keep moving, and the music too forces you to feel like there's no safe place. Personally, I couldn't even put my controller down before getting out of there. It's tense. But finally, it's time for some respite. Reflection. It takes a new meaning in this game. It's not just thinking about what you've done. It's not about taking a moment, or even what you see in the mirror. Here, Madeline and Theo, both piano and guitar, are left off to play in harmony. As the two talk underneath the stars, it's here where we truly learn about why Theo's up here. He's worried about the expectations his family have, and he's worried about never finding his own path. And we learn more about Madeline too. Just opening up about her issues is proving to help her greatly, as by the end of the conversation, she asks if she can take a picture with Theo, showing us, the player, how much she's grown. If we remember the previous two pictures she's taken with Theo, it's night and day. The two finally fall asleep, and as a dream sequence begins, we're treated to the same song being played only in synth. Of course, starting off light. But the higher we go, the darker and darker it sounds, the more tense it feels. Even though we just heard this song being played by piano and guitar, the game makes it almost impossible to think about that, with just how tense and powerful this section is. As you finally start to have a conversation with Madeline, you tell her about how you just want to leave her behind, how you want to move on and be happier with life, and that you think she would be happier too. And things go wrong really quickly. We start to see Madeline feel afraid. And as we sit there, the synth, just like the characters, is moving in circles. I'm not just saying that figuratively either. If you have headphones, put them on. You can hear the synth going almost around your head. And things go even worse. She gets angrier and angrier. As she uses these tendril-like things to capture you, you start to use the feather to try and control yourself. But it doesn't work. She gets even angrier that you insulted her by trying to use a feather of all things to stop her. She gets angry, condemns you, and then drags you to the absolute bottom of the mountain. As you fall deep into a cavern with a lot of pink crystals and weird blocks, a somber song plays. You were so close, and now here you are, trapped who knows where. As you explore and reflect, you talk to yourself, you feel like giving up. And after all, Madeline was right. You lost. And this music feels that way too. Until you run to who else but Grandma. You tell her about what's happened, and she helps you open your eyes to what's really going on. Battling isn't here to stop you. Battling is a part of you. Not something you should be trying to get rid of, but something you should learn to accept and work with. Something you should be growing with. As Madeline starts to realize this too, she finds a new confidence and goes even deeper into the cavern, despite there being an elevator that would take her right out. As you explore these trenches further, the music gets more tense, synth picks up even higher, and you start seeing these tendrils again. You keep jumping, dashing, flying with these feathers, until you finally find her. Just like anxiety and depression, maybe things won't ever really go away, but you can learn to deal with and grow to control it later on in life. This is essentially, to me at least, what battling represents. As you finally reach her, you explain, you beg her to hear you out, and more importantly, to work with you, because you don't want to send her away anymore. And as you finally confront yourself, the climax of this game begins. As you hurdle yourself through caverns and spikes to reach your other part, you keep trying to reach out to her, anything to get her to understand that you want to work with her, not get rid of her. And as this battle rages on, acquire chants to accent this as your resolution. Drums kick in a steady beat, once again intense, but almost cheering you on as you leap from spring to spring, fly from feather to feather. The synth takes on the main melody, a change from the usual piano melodies to represent Madeline, now changes to put all the emphasis on battling. Now, this is all for Badeline's growth. And after raging harder and harder throughout these caverns, you finally best her. And you find her sitting alone in a room. And in a beautiful reminder to where this all began, a piano rendition of the song we heard when we first talked to Badeline is played, with a drowned out synth taking the back seat. Finally, Madeline is on the front foot, and Badeline is listening. As the two resolve, a beautiful chime plays, ending on a harmony of synth and piano, as we're now left with the merging of two powers. Turns out, this gives us a second dash and a super jump. The piano plays the same tune, but after everything we've been through, it's as if the song has changed meaning, from a fearful and sad song to a song of hope, resolution. As you run back to Grandma and Theo, there's one task, one final mission, and one sole obstacle that you both have to face. The mountain. Madeline is hesitant and scared, but with a renewed sense of confidence, hope, and power, Madeline asks Theo for one favor. Hold my bag. This won't take long. As the chapter ends, we are rewarded with the scene of Madeline embracing herself. All of herself. Badeline and all. This is it, Madeline. Just breathe. These are the first two phrases we saw at the beginning of the game. Starting back at the base of the mountain, the music plays a familiar melody. Do you remember it? No? Well, think about it for a bit, as we'll be back to it. Anyway, we start climbing with this new ability, the double dash, climbing out of the spiky cavern and finding ourselves super jumping 500 meters directly into the Forbidden City, where this song starts to show off its gimmick. If you listen closely, you not only hear the melody we've heard so far, but you also start to hear the synth and even the clapping that we heard back in Chapter 1. The The name of the game here is Mastery. As we go through the city one more time, we get to see these springs and moving platforms. Zipping from place to place almost feels nostalgic at this point, since it's been a while since you've been here. Now, again, after doing some more platforming, you do another super jump, and here we get to see conversations start to happen between Madeline and Madeline. They talk for a little bit, and they land back at the ruins. Once again, the song takes bits from Chapter 2 and adds it to its own melody. And you get to have fun with these blobs again. As you start dashing through them and see all these spikes and springs that you could have sworn you've seen before, you get to have fun. You get to show off how much you know at this point. And you get to keep collecting strawberries. You super jump again, have another slight conversation, and oh no. We're back at the hotel. I thought I could get away from these. Well, the fuzzies are back. They're all spread out, and they're ready for you to dash right past them. Even though Chapter 3 might have been an issue before, these fuzzies are no match for the double dashing darling you are at this point. Switches get pressed, and squeezes are made through these corridors, although no sign of Mr. Oshiro. And as you super jump out of here, Madeline thinks about him. Madeline, of course, is confused as to why, considering he essentially chased you out of the hotel. But you assure her you just want to make sure he's alright. See the pattern yet? We come back to this windy ridge. The wind still as powerful as ever, but the music slows down for a second. Once again, just like the main chapter, it lets you think about how far you've come. But it doesn't let you answer those questions. So, as you get through these winds and snowballs all over again, that's all you think about. How far have you come? How far can you go? And you once again super jump to the Mirror Temple. Synth completely overtakes this song. This place used to be terrifying, but as you start going through it, it doesn't scare you anymore. It's not dark. There's no more monsters. It's a bright temple, and there's no more distractions. Madeline finally seems to be turning things around and starts believing in both of you. She's afraid still, yes, because she isn't sure if you can make it to the top, but she's determined to try as hard as she can with you. No more distractions. Using the red bubbles again, you cross spike after spike and super jump one last time. Remember that tune yet? Any bells ringing? No? Well, that's right. The very first song. The very first obstacle we crossed. That very same tune is what plays here. I'm not sure if you got any chills, but to me, God, that could not have hit any harder. Personally, I always go back to the soundtrack and listen to the entire thing, just so I can get to this song and hear that tune. If you've gone through this journey, then when you hear that, all you can think is, we've come so far. And this is it. These last 30 checkpoints aren't for show. This really is the final countdown for you reaching the top of the mountain. And after struggling for so long, 30 can seem like a lot. But as Madeline's theme, now being played by synth and supported by piano, plays on in the background, it feels like nothing's getting in your way anymore. This is all for the taking. Bit by bit, and life after life, you climb. And this is no easy feat either. But as you finally clear challenge after challenge, marker after marker, and finally see the end in sight, this overwhelming sense of accomplishment fills me every single time. As the music fades and you take your last step and reach the summit of the mountain, you realize you did it. You made it to the top. Here's why this game hits me specifically hard. Yeah, this game is about Madeline overcoming these challenges and her anxiety, but it's also a growing experience for you, the player. You could have given up at any point during this adventure. You could have played anything else or listened to any other song, but you made it to the peak. You persevered through each challenge, collected every strawberry, and joined Madeline on her adventure. To me, this game taught me about how to go on in life when things get hard. COVID has made things hard, but here I am now, in college, the farthest away from home I've ever been, in a location that sometimes can be even scarier than where I used to live. But I keep going. Sometimes for myself, sometimes for the people around me, and sometimes just because I don't know where else to go. But I keep moving. Celeste is special in that way. It takes you on the journey. And that's why I find it so beautiful that the music makes you feel the way Madeline does. It makes you think about the moments you've passed like Madeline did. In a way, I too feel like I've climbed this mountain. To start wrapping up, Madeline and Madeline take a slow walk down the mountain, seeing the sights, stopping to take photos, seeing landmarks like the hotel, where we catch a glimpse of Oshiro, the phone booth outside the old ruins, and obviously we pass the mirror temple. But as we make it back down to the house where Grandma lives, we're surrounded by our new friends. We talk about the journey, and as Oshiro shows up, it turns out he was invited. See, the game does something pretty cute here. Remember those strawberries? Well, the more berries you get, the better the ending. In this case, I decided to get them all. So what happens? Well, and with that, one final thank you to Maddie Thorson and Lena Rain. Your game and your music changed my life. And as things go on, I'll keep thinking about the lessons you took me through in Celeste. Thank you. Well, that was a hell of a video to start with. This is my very first try at a video, and my very first try at an end card too. If by any chance you like this and think you might enjoy other videos like this, well, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. I worked hard to make this video real, so it would mean a hell of a lot to me, this amateur, if you did. Take care, everyone. Stay frosty.